They say the Mariner's export warehouse is cursed, that it swallows people whole and spits out nothing but questions, that the last 3 people who went inside looking for shelter never came back out, and the police stopped investigating after the second disappearance because even cops know when a place is owned by something worse than ghosts. I'd always figured that was urban legend, the kind of story cities grow in their forgotten corners to keep squatters and vandals away from condemned property. Turns out curses are just wealthy men with expensive taste in real estate and zero tolerance for trespassers. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the part where I was still naive enough to think I might survive the night. The rain had turned the waterfront into a mirror world, distorted reflections in every puddle. Reality and its shadow bleeding together until I couldn't tell which was which anymore. My reflection looked like a stranger, wild-eyed, blood-soaked, running on pure adrenaline and the rapidly fading hope that 200 yards might be enough distance between me and the men trying to kill me. Before we dive in, I pray that everyone who watches this video, subscribes, and leaves a comment will receive the very thing their heart has been searching for, whether it's peace, clarity, healing, or a breakthrough they've been waiting on. May unexpected blessings find you, may your silent prayers be answered, and may goodness follow you wherever you go. Please don't forget to drop a comment and tell me how this story made you feel. Now let's begin. My side hurt, not the sharp, immediate pain of the initial cut that had faded 20 minutes ago, but the deep, spreading ache that meant something was wrong, getting worse, needed medical attention I wasn't going to get. I focused on that ache. Anything to distract from the sound behind me. Footsteps, shouts. Leo Maxwell's voice cutting through the rain like a sermon on all the ways I'd fucked up. "You shouldn't have run, Sterling. We just wanted to talk." People who just wanted to talk don't kick in your door at midnight, don't show up with guns drawn, don't chase you through a thunderstorm like you're prey that needs catching before it spoils. The waterfront stretched before me, all rust and ruin, brick buildings slowly surrendering to time, the smell of low tide mixing with diesel, and something sweet rotten I didn't want to identify. This was where the city kept its failures, where ambitious plans came to collapse quietly, where people came to disappear. My sneakers were betraying me, soles peeling away, each step making sounds I couldn't afford to make. The warehouse loomed larger with every stride, massive, imposing windows like dead eyes staring out at nothing. I'd been running for 47 minutes, 8 months of careful hacking, all erased by one mistake, thinking I could expose the Viper's money laundering and walk away clean. Today, my anonymous leak had pinged back a trace. Today, my usual escape routes were all blocked. Today, the universe had decided I needed a lesson in hubris. The lesson was this: when you're running for your life, you don't get to choose your sanctuary. You take whatever door opens and hope what's inside is less dangerous than what's behind. 200 yards became 100 became 50, and the warehouse's service door hung there like a promise or a threat, crooked, rusted, leading to darkness that might be safety or might be something worse. I didn't slow down to decide. Impact, metal shrieking, darkness swallowing me whole. I'd expected rot, decay, the smell of abandonment. Instead, the air was clean, too clean. And then the loading bay doors opened, smooth, motorized, maintained, and light flooded the space, and I saw organized shelving, security equipment, a pristine black sedan that cost more than my entire education, and a man in a 3-piece suit emerging from behind the headlights like darkness taking human form. Valerius Thorne looked at me the way someone might examine an insect in their wine glass. Not alarmed, not angry, just assessing the situation and deciding whether to fish it out or throw the whole glass away. "You're bleeding on my floor," he observed, voice smooth and cold as winter silk. "That's rather rude of you, Mr. Sterling." Behind me, the service door crashed open. Leo and Silas burst through, guns drawn, and froze when they saw who was standing in front of me. Val raised one hand. His shadow moved. The Vipers dropped like puppets with cut strings, and Val stepped closer, crouched down, tilted my chin up with 2 cold fingers, and delivered the line that ended everything I'd been before this moment. "They won't bother you anymore. But I own the night now, Kai. What happens next is my choice, not theirs. He stood, brushed off his knee, gestured to his enforcer. Draven, see to his wounds, then bring him to the office. He paused, eyes catching on something. My laptop bag, the faded crest stitched into the corner. We have business to discuss, starting with why you're carrying my father's Research Foundation logo. The world tilted sideways. I'd forgotten about the logo, forgotten it was even there. Just my dad's old bag, passed down when he died, meaningless inheritance from a man I'd barely known, apparently not meaningless to everyone. Valerius Thorn walked away, and I watched him go, back toward that organized operation, back toward the truth I'd been too desperate to see. The warehouse wasn't abandoned, it was his, and I'd just become part of the inventory Draven didn't drag me. That would have implied resistance I no longer had. He simply gripped my upper arm with the calm efficiency of someone moving furniture and guided me through a door I hadn't noticed, down a corridor that shouldn't exist in an abandoned building, into a room that looked like it belonged in a private hospital rather than a warehouse that was supposed to be rotting from the inside out. The medic was already waiting. Older woman, steel gray hair pulled back tight, wearing scrubs so pristine they practically glowed under the fluorescent lights. She didn't ask questions, didn't even look at my face, just cut away my blood-soaked shirt with scissors that whispered through fabric, examined the gash in my side with clinical detachment, and went to work. Superficial, she announced to Draven, not me. Bleeds dramatically, but didn't hit anything important. He'll live. I wanted to laugh at that. He'll live. Like it was a diagnosis instead of a threat. The antiseptic burned. The needle pulling thread through my skin felt distant, happening to someone else's body. I watched the medic work with the numb fascination of someone whose adrenaline had finally run out, leaving nothing but exhausted static where thoughts used to be. She finished, taped gauze over the stitches, handed me a bottle of water and 2 pills I didn't ask about, but swallowed anyway because what did it matter now? I was already in too deep to worry about being drugged. Then she left without a word, and Draven positioned himself by the door, standing so still he might have been carved from stone. And I was alone with my thoughts for exactly 4 minutes before Valerius Thorn walked in holding my laptop bag. He'd removed his jacket, rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows with the kind of precision that suggested even his casual moments were calculated. The bag looked wrong in his hands, too battered, too ordinary, too mine, against his expensive watch and tailored perfection. He set it on the metal table between us with a soft thud that somehow felt louder than Leo Maxwell's shouting had been. "The Vipers?" Val said conversationally, pulling out the chair across from me and sitting like we were having coffee instead of deciding whether I lived or died. "Our children playing at criminality. Money laundering, street-level enforcement, the occasional venture into human trafficking when they're feeling ambitious." He waved a hand dismissively. "Predictable, manageable, irrelevant." His finger traced the faded crest stitched into the corner of my bag, the logo I'd stopped seeing years ago, just background noise on an inheritance I'd never understood the value of. "This, however," Val continued, voice dropping to something quieter and infinitely more dangerous, "is extremely relevant." My mouth was dry despite the water. "It's just my father's old bag." "Your father?" Val's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Dr. Marcus Sterling, brilliant researcher, terrible judge of character, dead 5 years now from a car accident that was ruled mechanical failure but had far too many convenient coincidences surrounding it." He leaned back, studying me like I was the equation he was solving in real time. The Sterling Research Foundation specialized in data encryption and digital legacy preservation. Cutting-edge work in genetic authentication protocols, work that my father funded extensively before his own unfortunate passing. The pills the medic had given me were making everything feel slightly unreal, like I was watching this conversation through frosted glass. "I don't know anything about that. I was just a kid when he died." "I know." Val's acknowledgement felt worse than accusation. which is precisely why you're valuable. The Viper's money laundering? A smokescreen. Mine, actually. I needed someone clever enough to find it, desperate enough to expose it, and connected enough to the sterling legacy to access what I really need. The exhaustion was crushing me, but fear cut through it like electricity. What are you talking about? Data, Val said simply. Old data. Dangerous data. Currently held by a rival who's spent the last 3 years using it to undermine my operations. Data encrypted with a very specific key that requires sterling genetic markers or legacy access to unlock. He tilted his head. Data called the Acheron files. The penthouse smelled like money, not the obvious kind, not cologne and leather, but the subtle scent of spaces that were cleaned daily by people paid to be invisible. Everything was white or gray, or that particular shade of black that costs extra. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like we were gods surveying our kingdom. Except I was pretty sure gods didn't get escorted at gunpoint by men named Draven. My sneakers, still damp from the rain, still falling apart at the seams, left faint marks on the polished marble floor. I watched them appear and fade as we walked, proof I'd been here, evidence that would be erased the moment I left the room. Val walked ahead of me in his perfect suit, not looking back, confident I'd follow because where else was I going to go? The windows didn't open. I'd already checked. The warehouse had been industrial, functional, honest about what it was. This place was a lie wrapped in luxury, beautiful and sterile as an operating room, designed to make you forget you were a prisoner until you tried to leave. Your workspace, Val announced, gesturing to a room that was larger than my entire apartment had been. 3 monitors arranged on a custom desk, a chair that probably cost more than my tuition, and equipment I recognized from forums where people with government contracts bragged about their setups. Encrypted workstations, air-gapped from external networks except through protocols I control. You'll find the specs meet or exceed anything you've worked with before. He opened a closet revealing clothes in my size, all neutral colors, all expensive, all picked by someone who'd measured me while I was unconscious, or had access to information they shouldn't. You'll wear these. Your old clothes have been disposed of. I looked down at the warehouse issue sweats they'd given me after the medic finished, then at the closet full of designer basics that could have been a uniform or could have been a costume depending on how you looked at it. What if I prefer my own style? You don't have style, Val said without malice, just observation. You have poverty and poor time management. Now you have a budget and a dress code. Adjust. The words should have stung. Instead, they just settled into the growing weight of reality. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even really a prisoner. I was equipment. Expensive, highly volatile equipment that needed proper maintenance and optimal working conditions. I walked to the windows, testing. They were thick, bulletproof probably, and the view was dizzying. 40 floors down, the city looked like a circuit board, all glowing lines and pulsing nodes. I could throw myself through this. You could try. Val's reflection appeared behind mine in the glass. He wasn't close enough to grab me, but close enough to react. The glass is rated for small explosives. Your body weight would just give you a concussion and prove you're more trouble than you're worth. I turned to face him. And if I am? More trouble than I'm worth? His expression didn't change, that same clinical assessment I was starting to recognize as his default. Then I hand you back to the Vipers with my apologies for the confusion. They'll be creative about your death, given how much trouble you've caused them. He paused. Or you could sit down, stop testing boundaries you already know are absolute, and we can discuss the Acheron files like professionals. The thing about being exhausted is it makes decisions easier, not better, just easier. I sat. Val moved to the monitors, tapping one awake with a keycard he produced from his pocket. My rival calls himself Constantin. Eastern European money, old world connections, new world ambitions. He's been using data from the Sterling Research Foundation to blackmail political figures and undermine territorial agreements. His fingers moved across the keyboard with surprising fluency. The Acheron files contain everything: financial records, political leverage, proof of crimes committed by people who currently keep this city's power structure stable. A login screen appeared. Your first task is simple. Access his outer security network. I don't need you to retrieve anything yet. Just prove you can get in without triggering his countermeasures. I stared at the screen, then at Val. And if I can't? Then you're not as valuable as I thought, and we'll need to renegotiate our arrangement. His tone suggested renegotiation wasn't an option I'd survive. You have 48 hours. Draven will bring you meals. The bathroom is through that door. The bedroom through the other. Don't bother trying to leave. The elevator requires biometric authentication you don't have. He walked toward the door, then stopped, hand on the frame. One more thing, Kai. Don't mistake civility for kindness. I'm not cruel, but I am practical. You're alive because you're useful. Stay useful. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. I turned back to the monitors, their blank screens reflecting my face, pale, bruised, trapped 40 floors above a city I couldn't reach. The Acheron files, 48 hours. I cracked my knuckles and got to work, because staying useful was the only currency I had left. The work consumed me the way drowning consumes, slowly at first, then all at once, until I couldn't remember what breathing felt like without the pressure of it. 3 days became 5, became a week, all blurring together in the artificial light of the penthouse office. Draven brought meals at precise intervals, 8 a.m., 1 p.m., 7 p.m., setting the tray on the corner of my desk without speaking, then returning to his position by the door where he stood so still I sometimes forgot he was there until I turned and saw him watching with those flat, evaluating eyes. Constantine's security network was a masterpiece of paranoid architecture. Layered proxies, honeypot traps that looked like vulnerabilities but were actually alarms, authentication protocols that shifted every 6 hours. I'd mapped the outer perimeter by day 2, started probing for weak points by day 4. Hit my first real barrier by day 6 and realized I was dealing with someone who'd learned from the same forums, the same underground communities, the same digital warfare textbooks I had. We were speaking the same language, which meant beating him required saying something he wouldn't expect. I worked until my eyes burned, until my fingers cramped, until the code started appearing in my dreams, cascading green text, infinite loops, logic gates that made sense until I woke up and realized they'd been nonsense. On day 8, Draven set down my lunch and a tablet he'd never brought before. "Mr. Thorne thought you should see this," he said, his first words to me since we'd arrived. The news article was brief, clinical. 2 bodies found in industrial waterfront area, identified as Leonard Maxwell and Silas Volkov, both with known gang affiliations. Preliminary investigation suggests internal conflict within criminal organization. No suspects currently in custody. I read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. "They were alive when they left the warehouse," I said quietly. Draven's expression didn't flicker. "They were a loose end. Mr. Thorne doesn't leave loose ends." He took the tablet and left, and I sat there staring at my reflection in the black monitor screen, understanding settling like ice in my chest. Val hadn't just saved me from the Vipers. He'd erased them. Permanently. Efficiently. The same way he'd erase me if I stopped being useful. I got back to work, but the penthouse started revealing things I hadn't noticed in that first exhausted survey. A leather-bound book on the shelf behind Val's desk. Worn spine. Gilt lettering too faded to read, pages marked with fraying ribbon. Old. Personal. Wrong for the sterile perfection surrounding it. Val came and went at irregular intervals, checking my progress, asking technical questions that proved he understood the work better than I'd expected. On day 10, I played music while I worked, something electronic, heavy bass, the kind of thing that helped me think. He walked in, froze mid-step, and said, "Turn it off," with an edge I hadn't heard before. I did. Not a fan of electronic? Not a fan of that particular frequency. He was already moving toward the monitors, but something in his posture had shifted, tension where there'd been calculation. It's distracting. Distracting, sure, except his hand had gone to his temple like he was fighting a headache, and the look on his face had been something rawer than annoyance before the mask came back down. I didn't push, but I filed it away. Another crack in the perfect surface, another hint that Valerius Thorn had been human once, before he'd become whatever he was now. Day 12, at 3 a.m., I found it. The outer security had a blind spot, not in the code, but in the architecture itself. Constantine's system was designed to repel sophisticated attacks, which meant simple approaches, the kind an amateur might use, got flagged but not immediately locked out. They were beneath suspicion. I wrote a script so simple it was embarrassing. Basic port scanning, credential stuffing with common passwords, the kind of thing script kiddies ran for fun. And it worked. Not completely. I wasn't inside yet, but I'd made contact. Pinged the inner network. Confirmed the Acheron files existed and were exactly where Val said they'd be, except the encryption signature that bounced back made my blood run cold. Sterling Research Foundation, my father's work, but not just encryption, genetic authentication protocols, the kind that required biological verification, the kind that couldn't be hacked because they were checking something unhackable, DNA markers, biometric signatures, legacy access codes tied to family lineage. I sat back, understanding finally why Val had kept me alive. He didn't just need a hacker, he needed a Sterling. The door opened. Val walked in, still in his suit despite the hour, like he never slept, and saw my face. "You found them," he said. Not a question. "I found them." My voice sounded hollow. "And I know why you really need me." Val smiled. Sharp. Predatory. Satisfied. "Good. Then let's discuss what happens next." Val's private study was different from the sterile office he'd given me. Darker, warmer, lined with books that looked read rather than decorative. The leather-bound volume I'd noticed on his desk sat open on a side table, pages covered in handwriting that wasn't English. He closed it when I entered, a reflexive gesture that told me more than he probably intended. "The encryption requires biometric verification," I said without preamble, too tired for strategy. "Specifically, Sterling family genetic markers, retinal scan, fingerprint, probably voice pattern analysis tied to my father's original authentication protocols." I dropped into the chair across from his desk without being invited. "You can't hack biology, Val. Which means you've been planning this since before the Vipers ever kicked in my door." He poured 2 glasses of something amber from a crystal decanter, slid one across to me. "Drink, you've earned it. I didn't touch it." "How long?" 6 months. He settled back into his chair with the satisfied air of someone whose plan had finally reached its conclusion. From the moment I learned Constantine had acquired the Acheron files and understood what encryption they used. From the moment I started looking for living descendants of the Sterling Research Foundation's founding team. The penthouse suddenly felt smaller. The leak, the Vipers chasing me, all of it, engineered. Val sipped his drink, watching me over the rim. "The money laundering you discovered was real but insignificant. I needed bait attractive enough to draw out anyone with Sterling connections who had both the skills to find it and the moral compunction to expose it." His smile was cold mathematics. "You weren't the only one who took the bait, but you were the only one who survived the vetting process." My stomach turned over. Vetting process? 3 others found the leak before you. One was incompetent, couldn't access even the surface layer. One was too cautious, reported it to authorities rather than acting independently. One was simply unlucky. He paused. The Vipers were instructed to pursue anyone who took action, to create enough pressure to drive them toward specific sanctuary points I controlled. The warehouse. One of several options. You chose well. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Constantine made his mistake when he hired the Vipers to recover your evidence. He thought you'd found something genuinely damaging to my operations. He wanted leverage. Instead, he confirmed you were exactly what I needed, Someone connected to Sterling, skilled enough to be useful, desperate enough to be controlled. I finally grabbed the glass and drank. It burned all the way down. So the Vipers weren't even working for themselves. Not entirely. Constantine paid them to eliminate threats to what he thought was my operation. I simply ensured those threats led straight to me. Val's expression hardened. You didn't stumble into this, Kai. The Vipers made a mistake, and you were simply the collateral I chose to keep. The words hung between us like a death sentence dressed as salvation. The Acheron files, Val continued, voice dropping to something more dangerous, contain evidence of my father's crimes, financial records, blackmail material, proof of murders, political corruption, territorial agreements written in blood. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the city. When my father died, I consolidated his empire by convincing his lieutenants I was legitimate, that his authority passed to me cleanly, that his secrets died with him. But they didn't. Constantine has them, and he's been using them methodically, releasing just enough information to undermine key alliances, to make people question whether I have the right to lead, to destabilize everything I've built. Val's reflection in the glass looked almost vulnerable. Almost. The encryption is poetic, really. My father trusted your father with his digital legacy. Trusted Sterling Research Foundation protocols to keep his secrets safe. Never imagined those same protocols would require Sterling bloodlines to unlock them. I set the empty glass down with a sharp click. What's in the files that scares you so much? Val turned, and for the first time since I'd met him, his mask slipped completely. What I saw underneath was worse than the cold calculation. It was grief, old and buried and still bleeding. Proof that my father didn't die of natural causes. Proof that I killed him. He said it flatly, like he was reporting weather. And proof that your father helped me do it. The room tilted sideways. That's impossible. My father was a researcher, not a... Your father was a brilliant man with flexible ethics and expensive tastes. Val walked back to the desk, pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed. Inside were photographs. My father, younger, standing next to a man who looked like Val, but older, harder. The genetic authentication protocols he designed, they weren't just encryption, they were insurance, leverage, a way to ensure that if anything happened to him, the truth would require Sterling cooperation to access. He spread the photos across the desk like evidence at a trial. Your father knew exactly what he was building, Kai, and now you're going to help me bury it. The photographs sat on my desk for 3 days like evidence I couldn't stop examining. My father, younger, smiling in a way I barely remembered, standing next to Val's father at what looked like a foundation gala, both men holding champagne flutes, both men looking like they owned the world. I'd spent 72 hours trying to reconcile the man in those photos with the distant, distracted father I remembered, the one who'd spent more time in his lab than at my school events, who'd died in a car accident the police had called mechanical failure but Val claimed was murder, the one who'd apparently helped a Mafia boss's son commit patricide. Val gave me space to process. Or maybe he was just letting me marinate in the truth, knowing I'd come around eventually, because what choice did I have? On the 4th day, he walked into my office and set a tablet on my desk. Constantine has a financial network funding his operations, he said without preamble. Shell companies, offshore accounts, the usual architecture. I need you to identify the primary nodes and create a vulnerability I can exploit later. I stared at the tablet. That's not hacking, that's warfare. Yes. Val pulled up the chair across from me, the one Draven usually occupied, and sat like we were colleagues planning a project. It's also a test. Can you do work that has consequences? Or are you still pretending you're just a student with a side hustle who stumbled into something beyond his control? The accusation stung because it was accurate. I'd spent years telling myself the hacking I did was victimless. Corporate espionage, security audits, exposing corruption from a safe distance. Digital activism that let me feel powerful without getting my hands dirty. If I do this, people lose money, maybe their livelihoods. People lose money every day. At least this way it serves a purpose. Val leaned back, studying me with that clinical assessment I was learning to hate. You're not actually concerned about Constantine's financial backers. You're concerned about your own complicity, about becoming the thing you told yourself you'd never be. He wasn't wrong. I opened the tablet, started reviewing the data, found myself already mapping the network architecture, identifying patterns, seeing the vulnerabilities I could exploit. Muscle memory, the work pulling me in despite my conscience screaming protests. "Why did you run?" Val asked suddenly. "When the Vipers came for you, you went out the window, left everything. Most people in your situation would have tried to negotiate or called the police. You ran like you'd been planning escape routes your entire life." My fingers stilled on the screen. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." I looked up. Val's expression was harder to read than usual, something almost curious beneath the calculation, like he genuinely wanted to know rather than just collecting leverage. "There was a professor," I said finally. "Dr. Chen. She taught me cryptography, gave me my first real job doing security audits for the university. When I found the Viper's money trail, I saw her name. Not because she was involved, but because they were using the university's financial system as a pass-through." The memory tasted bitter. If I'd gone to the police, they would have investigated the university, found her signature on authorization forms she didn't know were being exploited. She would have lost everything, her reputation, her tenure, maybe her freedom, for something she didn't do. "So you tried to erase the evidence yourself?" "I tried to protect someone who'd protected me." I set the tablet down. "That's why I ran. Because the Vipers would have used her as leverage if they'd caught me, would have hurt her to get to me. And she didn't deserve that." Something shifted in Val's expression, not softening exactly, but recalibrating, like he was seeing me differently. "Loyalty is rare, expensive. Most people would have thrown her to the wolves to save themselves. Most people are you." He smiled at that, sharp and genuine. "Most people wish they were me. There's a difference." He stood, walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "Your father had the same weakness. Loyalty to people who couldn't protect themselves. It's what made him useful." "And what made him dangerous? Is that why you killed him?" "I didn't kill your father, Kai." Val's reflection in the glass looked tired suddenly. "My father did. And your father helped me make sure there was justice for it. The car accident was real. The mechanical failure was engineered. By us. Together." The room was too quiet. Too small. "I have something that might help," Val said, changing direction. "Your father's research archives, Sterling Foundation kept backups of all his work, including his personal notes on the authentication protocols. I can give you access. Let you see what he was building, what he intended." "Why would you do that?" "Because we're partners now." He turned to face me fully. "Not captor and prisoner, not employer and asset. Partners. You need my protection. I need your legacy. And we both need those files buried before Constantine uses them to burn everything down." He held out his hand. I looked at it for a long moment, at the choice it represented, at the line I'd be crossing, at the partnership with a man who'd orchestrated my entire nightmare. Then I stood and shook it. "Show me my father's notes," I said. "Let's finish what he started." My father's research notes read like poetry written by someone slowly losing their mind. Or finding it, depending on how you interpreted the increasingly frantic marginalia that filled the digital pages. The archives Val gave me access to spanned 15 years, from pristine academic papers on encryption theory to rambling late-night journal entries that referenced people by initial only and crimes by implication. June 15th, VT. Senior asked me to build something unbreakable today. I told him nothing is unbreakable. He said then, build something that requires bloodlines to break, like medieval inheritance law but for data. God help me, I think I can do it. September 3rd. Junior is watching me work now. Smart kid, dangerous smart. sees patterns I don't teach, asks questions I shouldn't answer. VT. Senior says his son will inherit everything. I wonder if the boy knows what everything means. November 18th. I've created a monster. Not the encryption. That's beautiful, elegant, perfect. The monster is what it protects, what VT Senior is building with it, what he's making me complicit in. But Kai needs tuition. The house needs repairs. And I'm too deep now to pretend I don't know what this money costs. I read that entry 5 times, my name burning on the screen like an accusation. He'd done this for me, built the cage I was now trapped in to pay for my education. The irony was suffocating. Day 3 of the deep dive, Draven's phone buzzed, a sound I'd never heard before. He answered, listened, his expression shifting from neutral to something harder. Understood. Increasing security. He ended the call and looked at me. Constantine hit one of Mr. Thorne's clubs on the east side. Minor damage. 3 hospitalizations. Message received. What message? That he knows you're here. That he knows what you're doing. Draven moved to the window, scanning the street below with practiced efficiency, and that he's willing to escalate. The abstract threat suddenly had teeth. Constantine wasn't just a name in Val's files anymore. He was real, active, dangerous. And I was the reason Val's people were bleeding. I worked harder, faster, my father's notes becoming a roadmap through the encryption layers, genetic authentication requiring not just my DNA, but specific biometric patterns he'd cataloged when I was a child. Voice recognition trained on recordings he'd made of me reading aloud. Retinal scans he'd taken during what I'd thought were routine eye exams. He'd been building a lock that only I could open, and I'd never known I was the key. March 7th. Final protocols in place. The Acheron files, VT Senior's name for them, theatrical bastard, are secured behind 7 layers. Each requires sterling biological verification. Each requires my son if I'm gone. I've made Kai into a weapon he doesn't know he is. God forgive me. I won't forgive myself. Day 6, at 2 a.m., I found it. Buried in his personal notes, a line of code so simple I'd scrolled past it 3 times before recognizing it. A backdoor. Not to bypass the security, but to authenticate using alternative biometrics if the primary ones failed. A failsafe he'd built in case something happened to me. A signature sequence based on how I typed, rhythm, pressure, the specific cadence of my fingers on keys. Something unique as fingerprints but impossible to fake because it required muscle memory developed over years. I pulled up the authentication interface, let my fingers rest on the keyboard, closed my eyes and typed the passphrase he'd embedded in his notes, hidden in the first letter of each paragraph across 50 pages. Son, forgive me for what this makes you. The encryption peeled away like skin. The Acheron files bloomed across my screen in cascading windows. Financial records, yes, but also surveillance photos, political dossiers, recorded conversations. Names I recognized from news reports sitting next to crimes I'd thought were unsolved. Politicians, judges, police commissioners, all of them bought, blackmailed, or brutalized into compliance by Val's father. And at the center of it all, proof of patricide. Val, younger in the photos, standing over his father's body in what looked like a private study. My father beside him, holding what I recognize now as one of his custom data drives. Timestamp, the same night Val's father had supposedly died peacefully in his sleep. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. The final folder, labeled simply Succession, contained a detailed plan for territorial takeover. Not Val's father's plan, Constantine's. A systematic strategy to destabilize every agreement Val had made, to fracture his alliances, to ignite gang warfare that would tear the city apart and let Constantine claim the pieces, and it was scheduled to begin in 72 hours. The door opened. Val walked in, saw my face, saw the screens, and went very still. You found them. I found them. My voice sounded hollow. All of it. Your father. My father. And Constantine's plan to burn this city down. Val moved to the monitors, scanning the data with the focused intensity of someone reading their own death warrant. 72 hours, he said quietly. Then we have 71 hours to stop him. Val's response to Constantine's plan was methodical violence dressed as strategy. Within 6 hours, he'd called in every lieutenant, every enforcer, every person who owed him loyalty or feared him enough to pretend. The penthouse transformed from sterile luxury into a war room, men in expensive suits studying maps, discussing tactical responses, planning retaliatory strikes with the clinical efficiency of generals. I sat at my monitors, feeding them intelligence from the Acheron files, financial vulnerabilities, supply chain weaknesses, the locations of Constantine's safe houses pulled from metadata in his communications. I'd become exactly what Val had made me, a weapon aimed at his enemies. The attack came on hour 19. I was alone, Val coordinating operations from another location, Draven accompanying him, the penthouse supposedly secure behind biometric locks and surveillance that covered every approach. I was tracking a wire transfer that would lead to one of Constantine's primary accounts when the power died. Not flickered, died. Complete blackout. And the backup generators that should have kicked in stayed silent. My training, Val's training, the last 3 weeks of living in controlled captivity, took over before conscious thought caught up. I grabbed the portable drive with the Acheron files backup, shoved it in my pocket, and moved away from the windows toward the interior hallway where the shadows were deepest. The elevator chimed. Impossible. The elevator required biometric authentication. Unless someone had bypassed it. Unless someone had Constantine's resources and desperation. I heard footsteps. Multiple people. Professional, quiet, spreading through the penthouse with tactical precision. I'd seen enough of Val's operations to recognize a hit squad when one was hunting me. The equipment Val had given me included a panic button disguised as a watch. I pressed it, praying the signal would reach him, knowing he was 20 minutes away minimum. I had to survive 20 minutes against people trained to kill. The office door opened, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. I'd already moved, using the layout I'd memorized during weeks of captivity, through the bedroom, into the bathroom. The window there was smaller, reinforced, but it had an emergency release Val had shown me. In case of fire, he'd said, though we both knew he meant in case of betrayal. Find the Sterling kid. Constantine wants him alive if possible. Dead is acceptable. I hit the emergency release. The window cracked open 6 inches. Enough for air. Not enough for escape, but enough to make noise. They heard it. Footsteps converging. I grabbed the only weapon available, a heavy crystal decanter from Val's collection, still half full of expensive whiskey, and positioned myself beside the door. The first man through got crystal and alcohol to the face. He went down hard. His partner reacted faster, gun coming up, but I was already moving, inside his guard the way Draven had shown me during a lesson I'd thought was theoretical. Grabbing his wrist, redirecting the weapon. The gun fired, deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet took a chunk out of the marble wall 6 inches from my head. Then the lights came back on, and Draven was there. I'd never seen him actually fight before, just that single, efficient takedown of the Vipers. This was different. This was artistry written in violence. 3 men down in under 10 seconds, movements so fast they blurred together. The 4th man, the one I'd hit with the decanter, tried to run. He didn't make it to the door. Val appeared in the doorway, suit jacket torn, blood on his collar that I hoped wasn't his. His eyes found me immediately, cataloging injuries, checking for damage, and something in his expression cracked open. You're hurt. Not a question. Statement of fact. My shoulder was bleeding where I'd hit the wall during the struggle. Minor. Superficial. But Val crossed the space between us like the distance was offensive, hands coming up to grip my face, turning my head to examine the wound with an intensity that bordered on fury. I'm fine. The files are safe. I backed them up. I don't care about the files. His voice was raw, stripped of its usual control. Constantine sent 6 men. 6, to take you to take what's mine. The possessiveness in that word made something in my chest constrict. Val, you could have died, you could have been taken, and I would have burned this entire city down to get you back. His hands were still on my face, thumbs brushing my cheekbones with a gentleness that contradicted the violence surrounding us. Do you understand? This stopped being about the Acheron files the moment you broke the encryption. The moment I realized, he stopped, swallowed, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more dangerous. It was never just business for me. From that first moment in the warehouse, when you looked at me like I was death incarnate but stood your ground anyway, you were mine. My responsibility, my asset, He exhaled sharply. Mine. I should have been terrified, should have recognized the claim for what it was. Ownership, possession, the final lock on my cage. Instead, I leaned into his touch and said the truth I'd been avoiding for weeks. I know. I've known since the penthouse, since you showed me my father's notes and gave me the choice to walk away. You didn't walk away. No. I smiled despite everything, the blood, the bodies, the life I'd lost. I chose you instead. Val kissed me then, fierce and claiming and absolute. When he pulled back, his eyes were molten darkness. You never have to run again, he promised against my mouth. Not from Constantine, not from anyone, I'll make sure of it. And I believed him. The war lasted 3 weeks and ended with the kind of silence that follows controlled demolitions, sudden, absolute, leaving nothing but dust settling over ruins. Val used the Acheron files like surgical instruments, each piece of intelligence deployed precisely where it would do maximum damage. Constantine's financial networks collapsed first, offshore accounts frozen by authorities who'd suddenly received anonymous tips with irrefutable evidence. Then his political protection evaporated. Judges, commissioners, politicians all scrambling to distance themselves from a sinking ship. Finally, his territorial holdings fell like dominoes as Val's forces moved in with the overwhelming efficiency of an army that knew exactly where the enemy would be. Constantine himself disappeared on day 17. No body, no arrest, just gone. The way people went gone in Val's world. Permanently, efficiently, leaving only questions no one dared ask. I watched it happen from my monitors, tracking the cascade of consequences my father's encryption had protected, that I'd unlocked, that Val had weaponized. Each victory felt like vindication and damnation in equal measure. The penthouse returned to its sterile quiet. The war room furniture disappeared. The lieutenant stopped coming. And on the morning of week 4, Val walked into my office and set a folder on my desk. Open it, he said, voice neutral in a way that made me nervous. Inside, a passport with my photo but a different name. Bank account information showing a balance that made my tuition debt look like pocket change. Documentation for an apartment in a city I'd never been to, paid in full for 5 years. A new identity, complete and untraceable. What is this? Val sat in the chair across from me, the one he'd claimed as his during our partnership. Freedom, a choice. The original arrangement was forced. You needed protection. I needed your legacy access. Both objectives have been achieved. He gestured to the folder. That's enough money to finish your degree anywhere in the world, to disappear completely, to live the life you would have had if the Vipers had never kicked in your door. I stared at the passport photo, my face, someone else's name, a future that looked like escape. You're letting me go. I'm giving you a choice. His expression was carefully controlled, but something flickered beneath it. Stay because you want to, or leave knowing you're free to do so. Either way, Constantine's threat is eliminated. You've fulfilled your obligation. The word obligation sat wrong in the space between us, like calling a forest fire a light source, or a hurricane inclement weather. And if I stay? Then you stay as my partner, not my prisoner, not my asset. Val's voice dropped lower. You'd work beside me, help maintain the security systems that keep this empire stable. Use your skills to prevent the next Constantine before they become a threat. He paused. You'd be mine by choice, not circumstance. I looked at the folder, at the escape it represented, at the life I could reclaim if I walked out that door. Then I looked at Val, at the man who'd orchestrated my nightmare, who'd saved me from it, who'd shown me my father's sins and my own capacity for darkness. The man who'd kissed me surrounded by bodies and promised I'd never have to run again. I'm not naive enough to think this is romance, I said quietly. What we have was built on desperation and survival and mutually assured destruction. No, Val's agreement was immediate. It's not romance. It's something more permanent than that. I closed the folder, pushed it back across the desk. Then I'm staying. Not because I'm obligated, not because I'm afraid. I met his eyes. Because the world you showed me, the real one, without the comfortable lies I used to tell myself, that world is more honest than anything I'd find out there. And I'd rather face it beside you than run from it alone. Something shifted in Val's expression, not quite a smile, but close. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. Then we have work to do. He stood, offered his hand. I took it, and he pulled me up and through the office door, down the hallway to the main room where the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The sun was setting, painting the skyline in shades of amber and blood. From 40 floors up, the city looked almost peaceful, all those lives moving below us, unaware of the power structures that shaped their reality. The wars fought in shadows to maintain the illusion of order. Your official title is Technical Security Advisor, Val said, standing beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. Your actual role is whatever we need it to be. My empire runs on information, and you control the flow of it now. I looked out over the city, over the streets where I'd run for my life, over the warehouse where I'd been captured, over the future I'd chosen instead of the freedom I'd been offered. Where do we start? Val's reflection in the glass smiled, sharp, predatory, satisfied. There's a new player moving into the Eastern Territory, someone who thinks Constantine's absence creates opportunity. He pulled up a tablet, showing me surveillance photos and financial data. I need to know everything about them before they become a problem. I took the tablet, already analyzing the patterns, seeing the vulnerabilities. Consider it done. We stood there together as the sun finished setting and the city lights came on like stars, mapping the territory we controlled. Not prisoner and captor anymore. Not even just partners. Something more permanent than that. Something I'd chosen. And for the first time since the Vipers had kicked in my door, I felt something other than fear. I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Thank you for staying with me till the very end of this story. Every view, every comment, every moment you spend here keeps these stories alive. If you felt this one, make sure to subscribe and let me know you watched to the end.